Hey, it's Mazzy, and I have Johnny. I was going to say Johnny 6 inch, but we in Birmingham, United Kingdom. Welcome, Johnny.
Hey, Mazzy.
John.
Nobody's ever called me Johnny. What's all
I
that
know
about?
it's just Johnny 6 inch. Now, there's a link below to John's channel. John, to me, has the best channel in terms of soul, R&B, reggae, everything in that realm. He knows better than certainly any American I know in terms of soul music that I know personally. My late friend Coleman was in as much into it, so I learned a lot from him. But we've done a couple of collaborations, and I had the pleasure 3 months ago now in August of meeting up with a bunch of the UK vinyl community people, including John. We had a great pub crawl day.
That's right. Well, that's what you've got to do. You come to the UK, you've got to go on a pub crawl, haven't you? That's one of the rules.
I've said it on it, those of you who watched the tour, the daily tours. I think I did 5 of those videos. I couldn't keep up with these guys. A pub, I can do a Guinness, but I think the joke was that Mazzy had one Guinness where he brought around to each pub and he never finished that one. So it's a
That's what
little
he looked
truth
like.
to
That's what
that.
he looked like to me, anyway. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. And then we went to Greenwich the next day and had a great time. But anyway, what we're going to do here, we just wanted to have a fun collaboration. So I came up with this concept, and John agreed to me that we each picked 5 bands. Now, John is a native Birmingham. I might have to point to you every time I say it because out here we say like Birmingham, Alabama,
yeah,
like Randy Newman's song and Boulder to
yeah,
Birmingham and all that. But say it for me once.
yeah. So it's Birmingham. So yeah, it's not Birmingham. It's Birmingham.
So you really say the G, Birmingham,
Birmingham. There you go.
Birmingham. So it's like Gum, but it's not spelled that.
Yeah, that's
Birmingham.
right. Yeah, you don't
Okay,
you don't pronounce the H.
got it. So I've picked 5, more or less. Birmingham. See, I'm going to point to you, and you can
Yeah,
say every time.
you're getting there.
And
You're getting there, Mazzy.
yeah, Birmingham. And since
That's terrible.
I'm a native San Franciscan. Yes, I'm an expatriate into Seattle now, but I don't want to go Seattle bands. I'm sorry. Grunge. I asked John to select 5 San Francisco Bay Area bands, which could be San
Yeah,
Francisco, Oakland, El Cerrito,
yeah.
San Jose, all that. So we don't know what each other's doing, and we're going to just go through it. And we're each going to dive in if we have responses because we may know our local bands better, maybe not. We'll see how this
Maybe
goes.
not.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
So why don't you start out?
Okay, right. So I thought this was quite interesting because certainly with San Francisco, that city is really associated with that summer of love. You know, the hippie dream, Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead and all these sort of bands. And if I'm totally honest with you, although I own many of those records, they don't really mean a great deal to me. Right. So I'm
I
coming
would
from a
have guessed that actually.
yeah, so the band that I'm going to start with is Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to that 1967, 68 period, Summer of Love, that whole psychedelic vibe. Certainly the start of Sly's career, he had all that thing going on. The music was positive. A lot of love in the air. Obviously Sly and the Family Stone were a mixed race band, a mixed gender band. They really fell in with that whole scene. And so this is the album, think from '69. This is Stand. But quite quickly, their sound changed. So you got the brightness and the positivity of those early singles like Dance to the Music and Everyday People, which obviously was a number one single. They had a few number one singles. But you get to the early 70s and their sound changes. It becomes a lot darker. Now, I'm going to throw you a Beatles reference, Mazzy, right? Because I'm pretty sure. I think going back to the anthology film, the documentary, doesn't George Harrison talk about going to San Francisco in around '68, and he's going there, thinking he's going to find the hippie dream there, and
He
what he
hated,
finds,
he hated it.
he hated it. A lot of dirty, drug.
67, pimply.
That's
Exactly.
basically. He absolutely hated it.
There's a great photograph of him with Patty with the guitar sitting in Golden Gate Park with these pimply faced
Yeah,
hippies
yeah.
just surrounding.
Everybody just off the face on drugs. The
He was
whole
there a
posse.
year too late, really. I
He
mean, the
was.
Summer of
Yeah.
Love for the real deal was 66, but
Right.
67
Okay.
is when the press jumped on it.
Right. Okay. So he was there a couple of years after the event, basically. But that's the way I feel about Sly's music, because you have that early period where, say, you've got all these positive tunes, you've got the hippie dream thing going on, the psychedelic soul, but then you get to the '70s and you get to this. And now this is obviously there's a riot going on. This is a really murky sounding album. It's a very dark record. Clearly, Sly has a long issue with drug abuse. His autobiography came out last year, and it opens with him going to see a doctor, and his doctor basically saying, if you smoke crack one more time, you're going to die. And this wasn't him in 1971. This was him a couple of years ago at the age of 77 or 78. So clearly he's been a lifetime abuser of drugs. But this is it in 1971. It's dark, it's a little bit grimy sounding, but it's a wonderful record. It's that long, sort of laid back grooves. And yeah, I think this is one of their best records, but not necessarily their best, because I think their best record came the 2 years after that. That's their next record,
Interesting.
which is Fresh.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this includes the tune "If You Want Me to Stay," which the Chili Peppers covered. I think this is their best record. This is the one that I go to. But yeah, so my first choice there, Sly and the Family Stone.
What's interesting about Sly Stone is that he was a DJ in the Bay Area, in San Francisco first, and he started producing for Autumn Records, which was a small label. And the irony, when you think of the music style there, as a producer, the band that he produced that had a top 10 hit in America were the Beau Brummels, Laugh Laugh, which is basically the American answer to the Beatles. Three American guys, wonderful, interesting band, and Laugh Laugh, and with a little, not with a little hook, probably just a little or something. And they had one Irishman, Declan Mulligan, who was in it too, who lived in San Francisco. So he did, this was 64. They were before the Byrds, before the Byrds were coined, the answer to the Beatles. On this little label was the Beau Brummels, and they get signed to Warner Brothers, and eventually they become something else and never really fulfill their potential, kind of a cult band in a way. So interesting that Sly Stone did that, and then he formed his own thing. I think I moved my order around because I want to start, since you're starting with a multicultural band, I'm going to start with one that you know better than I know. And I just have their first and I think their second album, but the second album is the one that really broke in America too. And that obviously is UB40. And this, where they do all these, I assume they're all covers, or most of them are covers of these reggae things. Of course, Red Red Wine, Neil Diamond song, but
Yeah.
reggae version of that. Cherry O Baby, of course, of the I got that soundtrack. I remember that great import on Trojan from Bam Bam to Cherry O Baby is one of the
Okay.
first comps, reggae
Yeah.
comps I got around the time of Harder They Come, I think. But this album was huge in America, and I saw them
Yeah.
either in '83 or '84 at a mid-sized venue, which was great. But years later, and I know you've showed this album before, years later, I got this. And I know this was a pretty big cultural thing in the UK, obviously, because why don't you can explain, this was the unemployment form?
Yeah, still employment card, yes. So you'd complete that to get to get paid your weekly check type thing. So, but that's their debut album. Their
Right.
second album is actually called Present Arms. So the third album is Labor of Love, which is the
Okay.
covers record, and
So I went
that's
backwards
their
again.
breakthrough record. Yeah.
I started this, went back to this, and of course it
Yeah.
has 45, and I think there's a cover of what's a Billie Holiday song that she had a big hit, Body, da, 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 da. Um, I'm blanking out. I gotta look. Oh, Strange Fruit. I'm sorry, Strange
Yeah.
Fruit.
Sorry, of course.
Yeah, of course. One of the great songs. But also, this is a time, and you could probably talk about that more. I mean, this is like right in the Thatcher years, and
It is. Yeah.
I like the politics of music. Sometimes when I jump in politics in
Mm.
my videos, some people get very kind of put off by
Yeah.
talking politics, because I do refer to current things that go on around the world. Like, obviously, in America now we're going through some stuff. But I just love this record. I don't know it as well as the other one, but it's a reissue, but
Yeah.
love it.
No, it's great. So that for me is the best UK reggae album, their debut album, Signing Off. A lot of people would perhaps shout up Steel Pulse, who was another Birmingham reggae
Birmingham
band.
band. I
Yeah,
almost picked them. I
course, yeah.
almost picked them.
Yeah, so they put out a record called Handsworth Revolution, which is obviously, which is quite often cited as the best UK reggae band record. But for me, it's that one. I love those early UB40 records. So their third record, their Labour of Love, which had all the big cover versions on it. You mentioned Cherry O Baby, the old Eric Donaldson song, which they do a great version, and it's the same with Red Red Wine. So up until he finished touring, Neil Diamond was performing that song the same way that UB40 would.
Oh,
So
really?
he'd do a rap in the middle, the same as Astro used to do. So a little bit embarrassing, but that has become the definitive version of that song.
We even got,
So
what is it, a year or two later, was it 84, 85, that great cover with Chrissy Hind of I Got
yeah,
You. I love
yeah,
that. I love that.
yeah.
And
They
wasn't
were
this,
massive. They were massive for a while there. They really were.
yeah, and this is around the time, I guess this, another band for me, the Twin Tone stuff, the Specials was around that time too, with obviously the multicultural band and the mixed band. I mean, this was really mixed, not just black and white, right? There's a lot of,
Yes, so that was recorded about 2 miles from where I am here. So it was recorded in a bed sit in Moseley in Birmingham, like a suburb of Birmingham, and yeah, I mean, very quickly they were massive. They had the singles from that album were top 10 singles, stuff like "Food for Thought," which is still one of my favourite songs. I think, yeah, it's a timeless record. I mean, if people don't know it, then it's definitely one to check out because UK reggae definitely has a different feel to Jamaican reggae. Jamaican reggae is very much built around rhythms. Um, the the UK sound is more of a live band sound, and that's what you have there. And the same with Steel Pulse as well, with
they're
Handsworth
larger
Revolution.
groups, obviously. They're like,
They
what,
are, yeah, they are.
7, 8, 9 guys in the
And
band.
both bands are still touring now in one form or other. So yeah, get a chance to see them do. Brilliant.
Now, has there been a constant? Let me ask you this. I'm getting sidetracked here, but I want to learn, and I think the audience would be good. Was there a real constant? Are there time periods in Birmingham of when music?
That was a good one. You did well there.
I swallow it. I got to think it. You shouldn't think when
Yeah,
you're saying things. You shouldn't just concentrate on the word. It just come out naturally. But like in San Francisco, we talked about the Summer of Love. That was a big scene. The
yeah,
next scene San Francisco had, they actually had a pretty healthy from 76, 77 on punk scene and then post-punk scene, like England. I mean, it seems to me London and San Francisco had parallel psychedelic things happening in 66, 67, 68. What was Birmingham like? Was it like this, or was there the best or the more famous
well,
time?
yeah. Well, I mean, I might have to, depending on what records you've picked. So obviously, I don't want to be sort of encroaching on some of your other picks, but certainly that period that you mentioned there in the late 70s, early 80s, with with the reggae sound there, that well, likes of UB40 and Steel Pulse, but also then just a few miles down the road in Coventry, you mentioned the whole two-tone sounds. So that same period, you had those two sounds in conjunction, really around the same time. And these bands were having massive hits here in the UK. They were having top 10 singles, #1 singles. It wasn't just a small sort of genre thing. It was it was all over the radio. These were the big hits of the day back in the late 70s, early 80s. So yeah, a real golden period for this
Great.
area here. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Well, we'll jump into that as we go, as we
Yeah,
continue. Have at it
yeah.
now, John.
Right. Okay. So I'm up next. So I'm going to a few years after my last pick. So I'm starting up with Jellyfish and the album Belly Button. So this band put out two wonderful records in the early 90s. So this came out in 1990. I think the follow-up came out in 93, 94, Spilt Milk. And you own both of these records, eh?
I have them both on CD, one on vinyl. I'm not.
Okay.
I had a problem with the reissues
Yeah.
that came
Yeah.
out
Okay.
last year, and I ended up trading them. I do have one from a reissue from 10 years ago that Omnivore did, which is excellent. And
Okay.
I have a singles box that came out a few years ago of them. But I love the albums, definitely. Spilt
Yeah.
Milk, and yeah,
Yeah, so this is the original from 1990. I don't have the follow up on record on CD because it's really hard to find a copy of Spilt Milk. But maybe
absolutely,
one day.
yeah,
But this sounds great. So this band. So for me, they're a band out of time. This record came out in 1990. It's a real Beatles, power pop sort of style. You can hear the Beatles influence. You can hear the influence of those sort of power pop bands like, I don't know, XTC, or bands such as that.
NCC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah.
the
And
harmonies, the harmonies.
yeah, the harm. I mean, it's drenching harmonies, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
great record, great songwriting. It's clear that these are well-crafted pop songs. It's clear that they spent a long time, getting these songs together. They didn't come out of a jam in the studio, for example. But at another time, if this had been put out even, I'd say, 5 years later, I think this would have been massive. Certainly here in the UK, when we got to the mid '90s, there's such a focus on that '60s pop sound. I think this would have fit right in. But it came out in 1990. I found out about the band through Kerrang magazine, which was a rock magazine over here. So the thought of this being in a rock magazine doesn't really sit quite right, but that's because the record company didn't really know what to do with them. So they came out around the same time as the likes of the Black Crowes, their debut album, and they were lumped in with that sort of sound. And it's a real shame because it deserved to do more. Great songs. As I say, there's a real Beatles influence. I think on some of the B sides they did. I remember buying a single, "I Want to Stay Home," which I think had covers of Wing songs on the B side. You had a cover of Jet. I think you had a cover of Let 'Em In as well. Yeah, there you go. He's got it. But yeah, this is a great record. And I say, if you don't know this record, check it out. Really
Yeah,
good
this
stuff.
is the little box with all the singles and the B-sides
Yeah,
that came
there you
out.
go.
And this is excellent. This sounds better than the reissues on that.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah, they came out. It's mainly these two guys, and I'm blanking
Yeah.
on their names right now. They're the geniuses of it, and then they bring on different musicians. So they weren't in the same vein of a band like 10cc, maybe more like XTC a little bit, but not
Hmm.
quite. They came out of a band called Beatnik Beach, which came out of the new wave scene
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
late 80s, and put out some mostly singles, I think, and maybe EPs too, but not. I don't think they had a proper album as far as I know. But I used to
Right.
see them. I never saw Jellyfish, unfortunately, but I
Right.
did
Okay.
see Beatnik Beach. They
But
just missed it. You're right. That time with the bluesy rock bands were happening again, and then of course a
yeah,
couple years later the grunge thing was happening. So that beautiful harmony vocals was not in vogue and
it just
not
got lost. I mean,
absolutely.
they did have a reasonable size, top 40 singles here in the UK. I think they had two or three singles I recall, but they were quite unique in their setup as well. I think the main singer, the main vocalist, played drums. So he would stand at the front of the stage playing drums and singing, which was a totally unique look at that time, at
Yeah.
least. So, but yeah, but this is a great record. I haven't heard the reissues. I remember you reviewing them
And
and
I'm
not.
not, I know you're not one that, it's not about that, it's about the music, and you know me about that. And so if it's something is that bad, it has to be bad. And it's the first
Really.
time I got them and I ended up trading them or giving them away. I forgot what I traded them in, I think, or sold them or something.
Yeah.
But I love the music. The CDs are better. So,
But the
okay.
follow-up record to this, Spilt Milk,
Spilt
has got
milk.
more ELO sound to it. I don't know whether we'll get onto ELO in a bit, but
I
it's
don't
got more.
know.
It's got definitely got more of an ELO sound. So it's almost like they start off with the Beatles and then they move into more of a '70s sound with the ELO. So
Are
yeah,
you from Birmingham? Birmingham?
there might be, there
Okay.
might be. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going with some. I'm keeping in the Johnny six in the John category here. This is the second album, and this was huge in America too, partly because of MTV, but also because it was a great album. This is the second album by Dexy's Midnight Runners. This is Kevin Rowland and Dexy, and of course Celtic Soul Brothers. But Come On Eileen was everywhere. I mean, after a while, that dance thing, you got sick of it really in America on MTV. But I also liked the cover they do of Van Morrison's
Yeah.
uh, Jackie Wilson said, because I love St. Dominic's Preview by Van Morrison, one of my very favorite Van Morrison albums, and that song mainly. Another band with a lot of members, a little mix. I think Kevin and the trombone player were the only kind of constant members throughout. But never. This is the one band out of all these bands that I'm showing today. This is the only band I never saw live out of the
Right.
Birmingham bands.
Yeah. Yeah, right. No, so yeah, I mean, one of my favorite bands, Dex, is so Kevin Rowland. I've said this many times. I think he's a genius. That first initial run of records, so that's their second album. first of all, you've got Searching for the Young Soul Rebels, which is more of a soul boy thing, you know.
I had that record, and I don't
Great
know
record.
why I got rid of it. I had a
Yeah,
UK copy with the green cover or the
that's right.
boy.
Yeah, it's one of the great debut albums. Followed by this. This was a massive record, obviously because of number
Come on,
Come on,
Ivy.
because a number one record over here.
Or
You
as
know,
they say, Tour I. I'm sure
Tour. Yeah,
people would
that's the
go in
album.
record stores asking, "Do you have Tour REA?" Yeah, rather than
That's it.
Come on, Eileen,
Yeah.
maybe.
So that's the name of the album. And then they made an album after that, which flopped, called Don't Stand Me Down, which is their best. It's a masterpiece, Razzie. If you haven't got it,
I
check
don't
it
have
out.
it. That's
Those
the one
first
there,
three
the
records.
three people on the cover.
Yeah, they're wearing
They're
suits on the
sitting,
cover.
they're very
Yeah,
suit. And then they
that's
didn't
it.
didn't do anything for like 20 years later or 30 years later or something.
It's a brilliant record. They have reformed since, and
Right.
I've seen them since. You know, still making great records, but a really, really interesting artist.
Okay. Yeah, I recall you showing that third record at one point on one of your videos. Yeah. Okay. Your turn.
Right. Okay. So something a little bit different. So I was going to pick Sylvester. You know, so Sylvester, um,
Gay Disco Soul.
yeah, gay disco soul. Yeah. So for me,
Saw
Sylvester,
her opening up at Winterland so many times. Some
did
weird
you?
the tubes. Oh, absolutely. He played all around, and he would play at Winterland. Bill Graham bills. It might have been the tubes because the tubes have that kind of bizarre theatrical thing going. If you know the tubes, Fee
Yeah.
Waybill and the whole not even prog art rock, whatever we'll call it,
Yeah.
very theatrical thing, and obviously fit right in.
I only know some of this. So is it White Punks on Dope? That was
Yeah,
what
yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
But that first album produced by, was it Al Cooper, I think, is brilliant. It's wonderful.
Okay. So I was going to go with Sylvester, but I haven't. Right. So although right.
Oh,
So
so you snuck in an extra band because
but
okay,
the reason
I see
why
how
I'm
this.
talking
I'll
about
see how you're playing this.
Sylvester is because this person both played with Sylvester but also produced Sylvester as well. And
Oh,
this is Patrick Cowley. So Patrick Cowley, who was in Sylvester's band in the late 70s. So I think he played keyboards on the likes of You Make Me Feel Mighty Real, which, you know, for me is the greatest disco song of that period.
that's an
Absolutely.
obscure choice for this. That's good. I like that.
You know, so he played with Sylvester. In the early 80s, he wanted to make three of his own records. So I've got a couple of them here. So this one is Mind Warp,
I've never
and
seen that
I think
record.
the one before that is Megatron Man. Now, Patrick Cowley, probably best known, and this isn't a bad thing, he's best known for a remix that he did of Donna Summer's I Feel Love, which came out in about 82. And this is the full 15, 16-minute mix of I Feel Love, which is perfect, Mazzy. It's a perfect record. It's a record that has to be heard on 12-inch single. It's, as I say, it's mixed by Patrick Cowley. But his own stuff is very much sort of dance music of the time. It's basically gay dance music of the time. It's high energy, and you know, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's just great fun. Now, Patrick Cowley, he passed away, I think, in 1982. He died of an AIDS-related illness, obviously at the time in San Francisco. That didn't know what it was, so they just knew that they couldn't do anything for him, and he died at home in San Francisco. But he left behind just a few records, which I say are very much of the time, but they're wonderfully, you know, they're just great fun records. And of course, he's worked with the likes of Sylvester, are just some of the best dance records, and I Feel Love as well. That mix of Feel Love, some of the best dance records ever made. So I just wanted to mention him on this in this
So
list.
he
So
was doing obviously that's when all the mixes for the clubs things were happening.
yeah,
In San Francisco, had a plethora of gay clubs. And but the nice thing about, I don't know, nice thing, but the gay clubs, a lot of straight people went to them. It wasn't just, particularly gay, obviously certain nights and certain situations. One club in particular called the I-Beam on Haight Street. It was upstairs and it was this gay club. And in the late 70s, around 1980, it really turned in. They would have 2 nights of music, and that's where the bands like Echo and the Bunnymen, The Clash, Billy Bragg would first play. So they would have like gay disco up until a certain time. Then at 9 o'clock, the bands would come in and play, or separate nights too, and they would have all these big screens of sort of gay porno science fiction things going on, stop motion,
as
which
you do. Yeah, yeah.
which is looking back on it, I'm thinking I'm probably 25, 26 going against seeing this music, and it was fun times.
Cool.
Okay, one of my
Well, there you go.
one of my very favorite bands, and they have several incarnations, but to me, the main guy, the main thread, obviously, is Steve Winwood, and that's Traffic. And I love Traffic. This is, of course, a UK copy, Falling Apart, pink. You know, us in America love getting these Pink Island copies. I have American copies. This is the original UK cover. We had a different cover, but I love Traffic, and I usually like the more psychedelic pop, Baroque pop stuff. I like this soul sing, obviously, the Blue-Eyed Soul of Stevie Winwood, and I like Jim Capaldi singing a lot too, and having the flautist with Chris Wood. But I really like and I miss and the chemistry or lack of Dave Mason and Steve Winwood, that kind of, he's in the band, then he's out of the band, then he's in
Yeah.
the band, then he's out of, it was like a yo-yo. And I just love this album. I just want to show this because this is a pretty rare cover of an Italian version. I just love this,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
first album. But these songs like Hole in My Shoe, Paper Sun, obviously Dear Mr. Fantasy, which wasn't
Yeah.
on all the versions, at least in America. It was added and they changed the name of it. But you know, they came from this really talented group. Stevie Winwood, I guess, was Spencer Davis Group from Birmingham.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
well, obviously. So what age was Stevie Winwood? So he would have been.
He was
Was he
like
15,
16.
16 something when he recorded those first
Give Me
records with
Some
Spencer
Lovin'.
Davis?
Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
Man. Oh my
Yeah.
God, right? Uh, what a great art. But this to me is a perfect album because this, you know, it's interesting with all the tempestuous, you know, relationship they have with Dave and Stevie Winwood. Both sides open up with a Dave Mason song that are very almost folky in a way. And
Yeah.
obviously later they would do John Barleycorn as a trio, which is
Yeah.
really kind of a folk rock, a beautiful record. But to me, this is the perfect album. Obviously, songs like Feeling All Right. I mean, the Dave Mason songs are friggin' great on this record.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Pearly Queen, Don't Be Sad, um, 40,000 Headmen Crying to Be Heard, No Time to Live and Means to an End. The writing of Capaldi and Stevie Winwood. Capaldi seems to get forgotten now, Jim Capaldi. Great drummer, great percussion player. Later on, when they toured on one version, they'd have Jim Gordon on the road. I think it's that live on the, not the
Yeah.
double live album, which was incredible. Dave Mason would come back for another 5 minutes and play with them again. And then, of course, in 73, 74, they do those Low Spark and Shoot Out the Fantasy Factory, which has
Okay.
more of a jazzy sound. And that's when I saw them on it was an island only bill at Winterland, and Traffic headlined. The middle band was free with Paul Rogers, and the opening was John Martin. And it was it was right when Solid Air came out. So it was such a
Right.
great show. But I've always been a huge, huge fan of Traffic. All their records, but especially this one first, and then the first one second. And I just love this band.
It's interesting what you say about the Dave Mason song. So Feeling All Right, it's been covered by everybody, and I don't think I've ever heard a bad version of it. It's such a
No,
simple song. So I mean, Lulu did a fantastic version. Joe Cocker, Paul Weller, loads of fantastic versions of that song, and they're all good. But yeah, as I say, it's interesting that it's Dave Mason that came up with some of those really big songs.
yeah, on that. And, you know, they never really had, like in America, I don't know how big they were in the UK. They were a band, and it's funny, whenever I read these, you know, threads of bands and people talk about Traffic, they almost seem to be forgotten to a point where they had FM hits, but they didn't really have any top 40
Right.
hits in America. And I don't
Yeah.
know if they did in the UK at all. You know, Mr. Fantasy came out at a time when FM radio was really kind of getting going in the States. And it's a long song, a 5 minute, 6 minute song, whatever it is. And so it was played, you know, the entire length of it. Uh, but people love that stuff. But it wasn't AM hits.
So do you like Steve Winwood's later stuff, the stuff that he did in the
The
late
80s.
70s to the 80s? Yeah.
I really like that. You know, occasionally like High Life Again, and I like you know, Roll With It. That I love that stuff.
Right.
When I go back to it now, I have those records. I mean, I bought those records, and then later I would get the CDs, and I really like them. Occasionally some of that 80s production thing gets to me, but
Yeah.
there's a certain thing that that Steve Winwood has that I just love because he's just got a very unique, soulful voice,
Mm.
and I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because that sort of period. There's so many artists that were so productive and made so many good records in the late '60s and well into the '70s. But although they continue to have hit records into the '80s, that they haven't seemed to have lasted as well. So Clapton's another one with Cream and Derek and the Dominoes and such like. Those are fantastic records, and working with Delaney and Bonnie and such like. But when you get into the late '70s and into the '80s, it's a very polished. It's that '80s production, and something's lost a little bit, isn't it?
Well, that's why there's a certain sound. It's the keyboards and the drum sound that uh,
Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of. That's why the bands that I prefer, the three bands that I love in the '80s, are the Smiths, the Talking Heads that go from the
yeah,
'70s to the '80s, and REM, because they don't. You might not like that kind of music, but they don't seem dated. They're guitar based. They're not that heavy production, that slick
yeah,
thing. They're not all Wang Chunged out, that type of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which I'm not no offense to Wang Chung tonight, but it's
I
just
know.
they seem to be the cliche of that kind of music.
Right. Okay. So my next choice, I've got a couple more now. So, right. So I'm going to go with Lindsey Buckingham. Okay. So Lindsey Buckingham, one of my favorite
Okay,
guitarists.
that's
Okay. So he's from the Bay Area. I can't
he's from
have
the
Steve.
peninsula. He's from the
Yeah.
peninsula. Both of them are.
Well, I think she's actually from Arizona, isn't she? I
Well,
think
yeah,
so.
but
Might be wrong.
they were down in Atherton, which is down near Palo Alto, and
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Right. So
yeah.
I can just squeeze him in. Is that
You're pushing it on this one, but that's okay.
that's all right. Okay. So yeah. So Lindsey Buckingham. So one of my favorite
You can't
guitarists.
do with solo albums though.
Yeah, I'm gonna do solo
Okay,
records.
that's LA. That's so LA. All right, go ahead.
There we go. Right. So yeah. So I just love his sound. He's got a really distinctive guitar style. First of all, he does that thing where he sounds like there's more than one guitar player at the time.
Like
He,
he's
he
triple
plays.
time. It sounds like it's triple time.
Yeah, he's playing the bass string with his thumb, and it sounds like two guitars playing at once. So in particular, if you listen to the Flute of Mac album, The Dance, where they reformed, and he does a version of Big Love on his own, and the guitar part on that is just extraordinary. It really is. But so as an artist, I mean, I think he's fascinating. And of course, we all know about Rumours being such a big album, and the White Flute of Mac album that came out before it. But in recent years,
Oh,
Tusk has
you're
had a lot.
really pushing it now. Not
Right.
at least Rumors was recorded in Sausalito, but
It was a lot so later, that's right.
at the
But no,
record
the point
plant.
I'm making
Oh,
about this though, Mazzy,
you
is that
disappoint me.
the point I'm making about
It's
this
okay. I'm
record,
cheating on a couple of the next one, the one after the next one. So
the point I'm making about this record though, it's that it's his production, his own songs and his production of his own tunes. So, and I think that ultimately he's carried forward that production style into his solo records, particularly the records that he's made in the 2000s and 2010s. They're quite dense sounding recordings. As soon as you hear them, you listen to a Lindsey Buckingham record. Um, I'm glad that he got kicked out of Flirt Mac in the end because that whole thing was just a total farce. That relationship they're trying to milk between him and Stevie Nicks. I'd much rather hear what he's got to say on his own. So this was his last solo record that came out, I think 2020 or 2021, something like that. Brilliant record. I've spent the day actually listening to some of his solo stuff that I've got on CD.
I like
And
the sound of his records. He has a real
yeah, they are.
dry sound. He doesn't add a lot of
That's
reverb,
it. Yeah,
and
it's a very dry, a very dense production style that he has.
I do like that
Um,
and appreciate it. You know what's that Fleetwood Mac album? It's the one, and I think it's a great album, except it's missing Christine. Uh,
yeah, say you will.
so I love the sound of that record. And there's
Yeah,
that song, was it Peacemaker? I think it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
There's something about I love it would have been better with one couple more Christine tracks, but and it's a long record. So I think I got the
Yeah,
volume.
the issue with that record, Mazzy, is that it's clearly you can see the business decision in that's made around that record. Lindsay and Stevie have 9 songs each. That's how it's split. So
Oh,
they've got equal songwriting, and it's just as you say, it's missing that third spoken effect. With Christine McVie You really missed the lightness of her songs there.
You know, I never considered counting who wrote how many songs on an album, John.
I think it was actually announced at the time, just to, it was that,
Okay.
and Lindsey Buckingham made it clear as well that the reason why he was doing these, getting back with Fleetwood Mac was to promote his own solo stuff, to get a bit more attention for his solo records, which largely went unnoticed unless he was on tour with Fleetwood Mac and they got a bit more interest. So there you go.
Okay. My next band, I just showed this in my post-punk video, but I'm showing it again because I've been playing these two records a lot. They're only two albums, the Au Pairs.
Yeah.
I love these records. And on a side note, after I did this, I got a comment, and maybe he's watching this video, from a guy that I didn't know about, but a gentleman by the name of Pete Hammond, who happens to be the drummer on this
Oh
band.
wow.
And because I
Wow.
mentioned that these are hard to get, they came out on CD, and he mentioned they're out on CD in January. They're pressing 1,000 copies of each album. Now, I'm not here to shill it, to sell it, but it's great that these are coming out. I don't know who's putting them out. I don't know the details. 1,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but unless they're doing it themselves. So if you're into the Au Pairs, now I saw them once in San Francisco. This record's a little too like deco. It almost looks like a disco record cover, although they're very danceable, obviously. Two men,
Yeah.
two women, very political in so many ways, obviously, just that cover alone. But I love this. When I talked about there's a handful of bands around this time in the post-punk scene. Now we could quibble of post-punk, what's the difference? And I kind of joked in that it's basically punk music played by better musicians and better recordings and a lot more layers to it in essence. These are very percussive records, a lot of bass, like, maybe not as electronic and as dancey as Killing Joke, but like Gang of Four, as political around the same time. All these bands around this time, as you know, that 1980, 81, 82, with what was going on in the UK are very political. And
Yeah,
again, I
absolutely.
said earlier, I
Yeah.
love it. But I love both these albums. This one has obviously more other artists on it. There's synthesizers, vibraphone added, saxophone and trumpet. This is my favorite, but they're both really good. But I think they had a few other singles, which I don't have, but they burned brightly and they were just great. Apparently, um, the main singer, Leslie Woods on here would talk about, I think partly they broke up because they were getting a lot of hassle as a woman leading a band, which actually wasn't that unusual. Bands like the Slits and other bands and, obviously the Chrissy Hind and that, but I, I just love this band and I just love it, particularly this record and, Birmingham band.
Well, I'll definitely be buying a copy of that reissue because I've got an original copy and my copy is warped to buggery, so it's
Oh,
it's unplayable. So yeah, so I'll be after one of those reissues definitely. So great choice, right? And I'm going to go with something really, really obvious. So I'm going to finish up with Credence. Everybody loves it.
El Cerrito, California. Do you know where El Cerrito is?
Not a clue.
It's 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 two or three. I think it's two exits after Berkeley.
Okay,
It's like next to Berkeley.
so I am right in saying they're a Bay Area band, yeah?
Oh yeah, East Bay.
No. Oh, granted, okay,
Oakland, Berkeley, El Cerrito,
right.
uh, Albany, that area. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a half hour from my San Francisco house, depending on.
okay.
Yeah,
So you can't go wrong with Credence, can you? Everybody loves Credence.
yeah,
That's the rule, isn't it?
and
So
they're so timeless, right?
that's right, yeah. And this is the thing with these records is that some of these songs they're not just Credence songs anymore. They're just part of the public consciousness. So stuff like Proud Mary. I mean, although personally I prefer Ike and Tina Turner's version, of
I
course,
knew you.
but
Of course you would. Of course you would.
of course I do. But these are just fantastic records and so much great material in such a short period of time, wasn't it? This came out in 1970, was it? You'll know more than me.
Yeah, but they had three hit
Yeah,
records in 1969.
that's it. Three albums in
Three.
96. That's crazy, isn't it?
A- And every song is great on the album. There's not a bad song on them. They burn brightly. It's so funny because they were the biggest Bay Area band ever. Maybe Journey years later. I'm not a Journey fan, but maybe
Right.
Journey. Santana didn't even sell as many records initially until way
Yeah.
later with Smooth. I mean, of course, you have Black Magic Woman, which is a
Yeah.
cover, and those records, but yet they sold everywhere. They didn't sound like a San Francisco, they sound like a swamp band from New Orleans.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, and despite the fact that their albums are fantastic, I don't really think of them as being an album band, more of a singles band because the
Yeah.
singles are just so good. They had a number one over here. I think it was Bad Moon Rising was number one, but there's several top 10 singles. I've got, in my jukebox, it only holds 50 records. I think I've got three Credence in there, just because they're just perfect for that classic jukebox sound.
And one of the greatest Vietnam songs, Fortunate Son. I just
Yeah,
think it's
well,
a good,
yeah,
I mean,
that's their
that
best song.
growls.
That's their
That's
best
again,
song.
I'm bringing back the politics. Someone's going to comment, shut up, Mazzy, with the politics. But
So,
that's,
Mazzy, I'm going to guess what your final pick
well, you,
is. I'm going to guess what your final pick is, right? So, you're going to pick ELO and you're going to shoehorn in the move and Roy Wood and Wizard and all this sort of stuff. You're going to link it to the Beatles.
oh, goddamn. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Leave a comment. Well, you're close.
Go on in. Go on in.
I did not pull a Roy Wood album, but I thought you need a little bit of a lineage here. Is that the right way of putting it?
Yeah.
Starting out, I'm coming from two different directions, obviously, Roy Wood and coming out with the Baroque pop masterpiece, both the UK and American covers of the Idol Race.
Yeah.
Jeff Lynne's band, Birthday Party. I love this, right? This is the one I first got. This is a later reissue with the UK cover. This might have even
Yeah.
been a record store day. I'm not quite sure. On Parlophone. Jeff Lynne, what a genius. I have a little bit of I don't want to say love hate because I like Jeff Lynne. Sometimes I get tired of his massive uh, compressed production and that he has to play everything now and he can't even hire a friggin' drummer on his later records. Hire a real drummer. I mean,
I know.
maybe in
Yeah.
person, but hire a real drummer, Jeff, when you continue ELO with your name or your solo stuff as ELO. But I love this record. I'll go to the move. This isn't the first, and this isn't even with Jeff Lynne. And I just love this record. And what's great about Shazam, it's just this really great. I mean, Carl Wayne and Roy Wood, of course, Bev Bevan has this thunderous drum sound I always liked. But what I like about this, it's like a heavy album, sometimes metal, sometimes poppy as hell, like Eleanor Rigby with Cherry Blossom Clinic and Fields of People, and a great heavy version of the Tom Paxton folk song, The Last Thing on My Mind, that goes on for 7 minutes. And Hello, Susie. I mean, this is a heavy, almost heavy metal at times, and then really light and folksy. And I think this is a perfect album. And if you like rock and roll, mix in with some great harmony, like Roy Wood really had that thing. So it was kind of cool when he did hook up later with ELO. And I am showing an ELO record. And the only reason I picked this record, my favorite ELO record is is El Dorado, because to me, that's the one that showcases that symphony sound that Jeff Lynne
Yeah.
seemed to want. Roy Wood is away before it got too compressed and too much of confusion, that whole thing, on. But this one I
Yeah.
picked because it's the best one, the best album where Jeff Lynne rips off the Gladys Knight song. I heard it through the grapevine with Showdown. I mean, right when you hear that song, I don't think anyone can listen to that song and not think of I heard it through the grapevine. And I love this cover by Richard Avedon, the great photographer who took that
Yeah.
John Lennon picture, actually. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful album.
Yeah, that's great. So Showdown as well. So I think the Staple Singers covered that as well. Showdown. They did a fantastic version.
Did they
But
really?
yeah, I like Jeff Lynne, and I know that he gets criticised for his production sound, and obviously I know he obviously worked with the Beatles, or whether that be as a band or um, or individually as solo records. But yeah, I like his production sound. I like the fact, I suppose, just like Phil Spector and such, like it's an immediately identifiable sound. You're listening to a Jeff Lynne production as soon as you hear it. And I can see why that annoys some people, but I like that. The thing I like most about Jeff Lynne is his accent, is his speaking voice, because he sounds like he's from Birmingham. He's got a, even now after all these years, he's got a proper Brummie accent, which I love. So
Does he
he
live in
sounds like
London? Does he live in London?
he probably lives in the States somewhere, doesn't he? But
Oh.
he's still got that recognizable Brummie accent. It's like listening to somebody in my family speak. That's what I like about it. So yeah. But
And you
those are
rarely see him without sunglasses these days.
you never see him without
Yeah.
sunglasses, do you?
Well,
So
there we go. I mean, there's a couple of things right
a
there.
couple of things there, yeah.
But yeah, I saw them about 4 times in the 70s, and I loved them. Once as a middle act, and then they headlined,
Right.
obviously. One time with the big flying saucer with Out of the Blue.
Yeah.
Jethro Tull opened up for them, which is kind of cool. And I liked when they had a full band of all these guys. And I mean, some of them are dead, some of them are not playing anymore. But now it's all Jeff Lynne work for hire musicians. Again, nothing wrong with that. That's like a lot of bands at this age. It's the main guy or woman and all these other musicians kind of on the road. But obviously an incredible live set. I've talked to people who saw them in the last year and just say they're still great. And I'm sure they are. I have no desire to see them again. But I just love it. Now, were they okay? These bands, The Move, were they around in Birmingham, or did all these bands like really go to London? Is that the deal?
I don't, so the move would have been around in Birmingham. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit too young actually, but yeah, they, absolutely, So even now, Roy Wood, you regularly go to a gig at Christmas time, and he'll bowl. If you go to a gig, he'll turn up and he'll knock out. Wish it could be Christmas every day with the band because it's a Christmas classic.
It's
So
like one of the top 10 Christmas rock songs ever.
it
So
is. Yeah, of course it is.
you alluded earlier about talking about the music scenes of these bands, aside from the 1980 thing. What was happening in Birmingham? Is that
Well,
right?
the one thing that we haven't talked about there is, well, we've only touched on these heavy metal. So, if you
Black
are,
Sabbath was an
yeah.
obvious. I thought about it and I just didn't do it. And I didn't talk about Peaky Blinders.
So, we talk about Birmingham, but really, I suppose you've got to put Birmingham and the Black Country together. Okay. So, when you look at it like that, you're talking about Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Led Zeppelin. So obviously Robert
Oh,
Plant is from
Zeppelin
around.
too, huh?
Yeah,
Okay.
Robert Plant's from around here, and so is John Bonham. John Bonham, there's a statue of him in Redditch where he was born, which is about 10 miles away from here. So yeah, so that's all part of that Birmingham Black Country heavy metal thing. So a key, we're known for that heavy metal sound base. So that's what it
Is
comes down to.
isn't Black Sabbath sort of the famous icon people come to see, the bench and the
Yeah,
stat?
so in Birmingham Town Centre, there's now a Black Sabbath bridge, and
Right.
on the bridge you've got a bench with the sort of pictures of the
I've
four
seen
members of
pictures
the
of that.
band.
Now,
Yeah,
what about that church from the cover of the first album? Is that in Birmingham?
I don't know where that is. I don't know.
Okay.
So I don't know. I ain't got a clue.
Okay.
I'm not a metal fan, Mazzy. I don't know, but
Yeah, but
so-
you live there. It's like, I don't know, I mean, we could, if you come here, we're going to drive 20 minutes and go see where Jimi Hendrix is.
but I mean, just you've got sort of, once again 10 miles from here is where Nick Drake's buried. So he lived in Tamworth in Arden, which isn't in Birmingham. It's slightly outside, but say about 10 miles away from where I am here. That's where he's laid to rest. That's where he's buried. And so it is quite an interesting place musically. We often get overlooked, and with London, Manchester, Liverpool being ahead of us, but we've got a strong musical history,
Definitely.
particularly around heavy metal. Absolutely, that's we would always argue that this is where heavy metal was invented. Its first made. And
And do you
people
have any idea why that is?
well, we're an industrial city, so
Wasn't
that's
Manchester too? No?
well, that's what Ozzy always says. Ozzy Osbourne always says around forming Black Sabbath and the sound, working in factories with, or with big machinery, and that's what influenced the sound. But whether that's true or not, I don't know. But
Because in
that's what
Manchester, I thought it's different because you get wimps like the Gallagher brothers and
you do, yeah.
Oasis
And Morrissey, and
and Morrissey and
yeah. So, but I love all that music
I do
from
too. I do
Manchester as
too.
well. But
We
it's
tease,
but
right? We kid, we tease.
we do, So, but it is interesting. So Birmingham does need deserve a bit more attention than it gets.
Well, maybe we're going to promote it here with this video. This will help.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, thanks for that. San Francisco needs a little help right now, but it's had a great history, and hopefully it'll revitalize itself a little bit. I'm going back in January, so I'll help contribute to that. Thanks, John. Thanks for watching. Hold off a
Cheers,
second.
Mazzy.
Thanks, everybody.